Hello, Renegade marketers. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. You're about to listen to an expert huddle where experts share their insights into topics of critical importance to our flocking awesome CMO Huddles community. In this episode, Christine Moorman of Duke University's Fuqua School of Business brings fresh data from the CMO Survey on where marketing stands right now. She gets into the pressure pushing CMOs towards safer, short-term decisions. She looks at the rapid rise of AI, the growing gap in talent and capabilities needed to use it well. And through it all, she makes the case for marketing to reclaim its strategic role in driving growth. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. You'll be supporting our quest to be the #1 B2B marketing podcast. Okay, let's dive in. Hello, huddlers. It's been a few years since I spoke with Professor Christine Moorman, who's given me permission to call her Chris. I still want to call her Professor Moorman. I can't help myself. Who is the T. Austin Finch Senior Professor of Business Administration, Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. She's also the founder of the CMO Survey. The CMO Survey, if you didn't know, is one of the longest running and most respected studies of marketing leadership. And the spring 2026 results paint a fascinating picture. More pressure, more AI, and more contradictions, frankly, than I think I remember seeing in one of these studies. So we're going to unpack what all of this means for B2B CMOs, and more importantly, sort of what effective leaders need to do differently in perhaps moments like this. So hello, Chris. How are you and where are you this fine day?
Hello, Drew. You're finding me on the Duke University campus in one of our video technology suites. So glad to be with all of you today.
Nice to have you here. So one of the things we like to do on these is an exercise where just in case they have to leave or we need to convince them to stay, if you can list 3, maybe 4 findings, just list them you think CMOs really need to take heart, and we'll go through them one at a time.
Absolutely. So there are many interesting findings from the survey, but here's sort of 3 summary points that I think stand out. So one is that marketing leaders are responding to the economic uncertainty and organizational pressure, and they're doing so by managing marketing more for the short term, making safe bets. Unfortunately, they're creating, I believe, and reinforcing a narrow view of marketing.
Okay, just list it.
Other facts. That's it.
List it. Okay, just list it because we'll discuss all those details. So go ahead, next one.
Second is that artificial intelligence is delivering real and growing value in marketing. On the other hand, there are troubling indicators that technology adoption is outpacing the organization's ability to manage it to its full potential.
Right.
And then finally, marketing capabilities are really important to business performance, but marketing organizations are systematically undermining them in the way that they're managing budgets, hiring, and the strategic priorities that they place on capability building.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about the first one. There is undoubtedly, I looked at the graph today, other than the Great Recession and the beginning of COVID, we are at a moment where they're really feeling the uncertainty more than they have in several quarters. That's for sure, right?
Absolutely. No, actually, in fact, when you look at this over time, which is one of the nice things about the CMO survey, we've been doing this since 2008. We get a very negative portrait on this issue of economic pessimism. So COVID levels were 50.9 on a 100-point scale. We're now at 56, which is the lowest point that we've seen since COVID. So marketers are pessimistic. What's going on? What are they doing? So one thing that's going on is that we are seeing tariffs and now probably all of the other economic forces that are in play with the war translating into price increases. And this is across the board. So nearly half of companies have already raised prices or plan to do so in the coming year. And for B2B companies, these numbers really split out between B2B product and B2B services, which you might imagine. So the B2B product companies are the ones that have are more likely to have raised prices. I think we have almost 60% either have raised prices or expect to raise prices. B2B services, on the other hand, we see that number is more like 30%, so almost half of that. So that's what's happening with regard to prices. But the bigger issue strategically, in my view, is that they are responding to the uncertainty by pulling back their targeting strategies. And they're focusing more on increasing the loyalty of their existing customers rather than pursuing new customers. And we see this with growth spending. We ask an independent question about growth spending, and nearly 60% of them say they're going to stick with the market penetration strategy in terms of the way that they're going to spend those growth dollars.
So wait, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So, and because this is sort of recession strategy playbook number one, which is hang on to your existing customers and try to upsell and cross sell them. So they're in response to this downturn, you're seeing them say, we're putting more energy against existing customers.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you, when we ask them why, they say, well, this is where we have our strengths. We're going to, leverage our existing strengths. The second reason is we have all of these resource constraints. And then the third, which makes sense strategically also, is that they think that there's more opportunity in those markets. They have these existing relationships. They're going to go after that untapped growth opportunity.
And in your experience, that emphasis on existing customers versus expansion into new customers is short-term thinking and is problematic? I know that Professor Sharp is a big believer, and it's always focus on the next customer because the existing customer you have and don't spend any money on them. So there are different schools of thoughts on this.
Absolutely. I think you really want to think about this as a portfolio. I think in general, marketers are tipped towards market penetration, perhaps too much. My data can't tell us exactly what's more or less effective. I would take a different kind of a longitudinal view of the performance effects. But I would say when we ask them why they're pulling back, they say basically they think that it's more important to build on the loyalty of their existing customers. Not even so much in the sense of cross-sell and upsell, which I think does make sense, but we don't see that.
Interesting. Because in real, where what comes up in huddles is it's so hard to get through procurement at these bigger companies. If you're already in there, it's just easier to do it. But let's move on to AI, because I think your findings are fascinating and do represent a real problem for the businesses and probably a societal problem as well. But so adoption is up, and you mentioned that AI is delivering value. Can you talk about the details of that and what that looks like?
Absolutely. So this is obviously a very bright spot for marketing, because marketers are really benefiting from the AI adoption. So we see that AI use in marketing has nearly doubled in 2 years, and companies project that it will account for about half of all marketing activities within the next 3 years. You can imagine that number being even higher in some sectors. But the business case is also strengthening. So what we see there is we've asked about customer satisfaction. We see gains to customer satisfaction year over year of 10.8%. Marketing overhead cost reductions, 14.6%. And sales productivity, which I know is important to your B2B marketers, 14%. So we see adoption is up. We see the value increasing, but there are these troublesome signs that the marketing technologies in general are outpacing organizational readiness. So we could go through some of those.
Yeah, and I'd like to, because it's funny, pre-AI, if you asked me, the fact that marketers were spending anywhere from 10 to 23% of their budgets on MarTech, and then if I asked the same marketers how were you staffed for them, they always understaffed, and so they were always underutilizing the marketing, the MarTech. But with AI, it's kind of a different story. It's not about understaffing. It sounds like it's under training.
I think it's actually both.
Okay.
So when we ask them where their weaknesses are with regard to AI and marketing technologies, we see this consistent message about we're not hiring to manage these technologies well. We're not training employees on these emerging technologies. These tend to be, when they rate themselves on these types of technologies broadly, they tend to rate themselves most poorly on the human capital piece of it. So that's one thing. I think just making sure that we get the hiring right and the training right if we're going to pull off AI. I think it goes beyond the system, in other words, that we have to have the human capital piece of it, right? And that's true when I looked at the numbers specifically for B2B companies, that's true for B2B companies as well. In fact, they tend to do no better than any of the other types of companies. That's just one piece. Go ahead.
Right. They don't do any better when it comes to hiring more for the tools or training more. Okay.
That's right.
But
That's
there
right.
was some adoption difference, I think, that B2B companies I think I remember seeing, were leaning into AI more.
I think so. I don't have that number on the tip of my fingers, but I think that's right. They do tend to, because in some ways it's a deeper part of all of their marketing activities. If they can make those systems work. So, but just kind of pulling back into some of the other challenges, what we see is that marketers are spending a lot, or giving a lot of attention to things like content creation, content personalization. Those numbers are way up. So 73% of companies are using AI for content creation, 65% for content personalization. But then when you drop into these more strategic, what I would call strategic activities like targeting, we're down to 45%. Right. Segmentation, we're down to 36%. So there's a missed opportunity here to deploy these AI in this way towards these broader strategic issues. So I think that is a big issue. So expanding the breadth of marketing's use of AI across these strategic activities.
Yeah, it's so interesting because sort of level one adoption of AI is content. And just one note for the listeners, I am absolutely convinced that you're going to rethink how you structure your content teams and so forth. And it's going to be like the content team is going to be the AI content team, and you're going to staff it accordingly as you think about it. So that's content, and everybody's there. And at least in our community, they're using it for content, and they're also it's helping with their AEO work and all of that. Level 2 is workflow. And then level 3 is sort of agentic, where it's actually doing your media buying for it and optimizing it in real time. And there are very few companies that are, at least in the B2B that I know of, that are at that level. So that data is consistent with the anecdata that we have here in Huddleland. So, okay, so we talk a little bit about AI. Here's the interesting part so a lot of the CMOs in our community are spending a lot of time in their off hours learning these tools and figuring out what they can do to help their teams. Some of them are hiring people to help train the folks, but they may not be asking their employees to do this weekend work. And so then there's this gap, which your research has identified, between knowing how to use and optimize these tools versus being given it. And so that's something that I think CMOs in our community really need to think about. Are they training folks enough so that they can take advantage of the licenses that you provided them? Okay.
Let me add to this one point here that kind of ties these 2 points together. So we've been asking a question about how does your company approach the development of new marketing capabilities? And that would include things like AI. And for a long time, and these numbers surprised me when I first received them, but now I've been seeing them for over a decade. The number of companies that say that they are going to do this on their own, what we call build in business. So they're going to build new capabilities by training current or hiring new employees with those skills. That number is almost 60%. So the build strategy really dominates when we think about learning new things. The other options are partner. So I'm going to partner for those skills, that knowledge and those skills. And that could be with a variety of different types of company. It could be consultancies, but it could be specialized partners who can do these services for you. And then finally, acquire or buy a company that can do these things for you. So you can build, borrow, which is another way of saying partner, or buy these new capabilities. And this dominant approach focused on building points to the fact that we really do need to think about getting the hiring right, because it's so important. And question I have about these results is why that pattern has not been disrupted given AI. Because in a world where these technologies are changing so quickly, does build really make sense anymore? Or does it make more sense to think about partnering for or borrowing, if we will, these skills from other companies and maybe learning over time how we can have those occur within our companies. And let me just point out that B2B companies are the biggest builders. So when we ask, across the different sectors, we see that, the average is 59.5 for the builders, but B2B product, 61%, B2B service, 64%. So they tend to be the more dominant builders, which means that they either have to hire or train or disrupt that strategy and start to partner for those capabilities, including the AI capabilities.
Yeah, it's so interesting that this meant. So first of all, another data point that sort of supports this from your thing is just how many B2B versus V2C and how much they use agencies for. And it's almost double. B2C is like 48%, and whereas B2B is more like 24% of B2C services, B2B services company actually put their money into agencies. So it's amazing. They do come at this with a do-it-yourself mentality. So that is just something that's interesting. I also think with AI, because it's accessible, so accessible, there is and there's been a lag time with consultants that it's just felt like it's easy to build this stuff. But I think you're right. I think we are going to get to this build versus buy crisis as you get to more workflows, as you get to agentic work and, how to do it. But another prediction that I would bet money on in a year from now is that a lot of CMOs in the community have an AI engineer on their team.
That makes sense to me. That makes sense.
Because the build mentality, because it's so fast, the advantage of this speed, whereas even with a partner, you still have to brief them and so forth, and the ability to, unlike any other sort of programmatic thing that you can do, AI is like, boom, you want a new landing page? Knock yourself out, go create it on Claude Code tomorrow. In 5 minutes. And so I do think that this build mentality is going to be hard to break for a while. So the last thing in your sort of 3 big points was about budgeting and so maybe we could revisit that, your last sort of key point.
I think the capabilities. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, because I really think the idea of a marketing capability is really where marketing can contribute. So when we ask marketers to rate the performance value of their marketing capabilities, they say they're doing pretty well. So on a 7-point scale, where one is very important and one is not at all, they give themselves a 5.9, which is a high score in the survey. Usually we see things more in the middle range of that scale. And so they say that these marketing capabilities are important, but there's a number of things that are getting in the way. One is that build strategy. So if they want these capabilities to perform for them, they're going to have to invest in the people to make it happen. And they're going to need to build the partnerships with the CFO to be able to get the funding for those marketing capabilities. When we ask marketers, what is the biggest challenge with your marketing capabilities? We were looking for a content area. We were thinking they would say, well, it's about channels or it's about pricing or whatever. The number one challenge that they described to us, it was lack of financial resources, lack of focus on these marketing capabilities. And that's coming from the upper echelons. They're not giving marketing capabilities and not supporting marketing capabilities in the way that marketers think they should be. So I think marketers are in some ways contributing to this, though, and maybe we can talk about some of the ways that marketers are contributing to this and what they can do differently.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Continue, because it's funny. I've written a lot about this sort of arbitrary cut your cost by 30% number that's floating around the C-suite and B2B land, particularly at PE-backed firms. And what's interesting, at the same time, you've got startups who are doing incredible things with no staff and no budget. And the CMOs who have 100 people are struggling because in order to really do this right, they'd have to create a skunk works to completely reinvent how they do their marketing and maybe even go to market. So, because I do think there is a world, if it was AI first, AI built, where they probably could cut their cost by 30% and hit their numbers. And I didn't think that 6 months ago.
A couple things stand out in this issue of getting behind these capabilities, and what marketers might be doing to hurt that prospect, which will drive down their costs, right? If the capabilities are powerful because they can have so many different effects on the organization. One of them is to make the organization more cost effective because you learn how to do things. So when we ask marketers to say, why are marketing capabilities important to their business, most of them tend to focus on the ROI for every marketing dollar that's spent. So 78% of them focus on that. But I think that leaving the focus there and not extending looking at that broader impact of marketing capabilities is where I think they probably fall short. So for example, only 52% talk about the impact of marketing capabilities on increasing the company's effectiveness in managing customers. That number should be higher. For another, only 42% say that our marketing capabilities are important to showing our marketing strength to potential and current partners. Only a third say that marketing capabilities are important to attracting and retaining top managers and employees.
Interesting.
Marketing capabilities can do all of those things. And it goes back to a point we didn't talk about, which is that marketing is often narrowing its focus on, just a few functions within the organization. And in our results show that they're a bit defensive about supporting the view that marketing can create these returns. And I think that's probably because they face so many pressures from top management. In fact, when we ask them, what actions do you take to show the value of marketing to other functions? 86% say we focus on developing stronger marketing performance tracking. So they improve their tracking, but then they leave other things on the table in terms of our results. For example, only 67% say that they demonstrate the value of brand and customer relationships. So I think, yes, they need the performance tracking, but I think our results suggest that there's opportunity here to think about, in particular, demonstrating the value of brand and customer relationships. And we can talk a little bit about some of the other data that I have on marketing metrics, if you like, that I think are.
Well, I've got some questions that I would or at least thoughts to share. So I wonder on the value of brand, if there's a big difference in B2B versus B2C. And I say that because anecdotally, at least 10 CMOs in huddles in the last 6 months have said, our CEO or my board of directors or our PE firm has told me never to use the word brand again in a board meeting. Literally. That has been the case. Sometimes they can get away with using the word reputation, but brand is color and it doesn't feel, it's arts and crafts as far as PE and boards are concerned. So that's one of the things. But in B2C land, everybody understands the power of brand and what that means, because that's pricing power, that's the exposure, that's beat it off the shelf. The bigger the brand, the better the known, the feelings on it. You see it and live it. So I've never worked on a B2C brand in early parts of my career that didn't have brand tracking.
I might disagree with you here, Drew, to say that.
Please. Good. Make it spicy. Let's go.
So, I think the point is that brand does mean something to your partners. Brand does mean something to your potential, employees that you're hiring. I mean, hopefully you can make the case that it also means something to the end consumer if they're aware of your brand. Sometimes they're not. And so all that value is going to occur in the partner at the partner stage of the process, the people that you distribute through or, that are, buying your products and services. So I think we need to think about that. But in other data that we've collected over time, what we see is that in support of this idea that marketers are tending to rely on things like content engagement, lead generation, even lead conversion. Those are all perfectly legitimate things, but what about things like customer lifetime value? What about things like, that look at the value of customer relationships? Those numbers are a tenth in terms of the metrics that are being used by marketers to demonstrate the value of marketing. I think
we have no argument. What I was saying, we have no argument there. What I was saying is the CMOs don't use the word brand because they've been told not to, because the executives don't see the value. And so, yes, it's on the CMO to eventually try to get them to understand. But when your CEO says never use the word brand, or your CFO does, you have a problem. You got to come up with a way around talking about it. And often it's anecdata. When the CEO talks to a customer and they said, yeah, I was at your event and it was so great. And I talked to a salesperson and yeah, we just bought this new thing. Then suddenly they feel it. They go, oh, okay, that's marketing. But it's weird. It's a weird thing. And again, my point was in B2C land, that never happens.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
And it's a weird dynamic. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This show is brought to you by CMO Huddles, the only marketing community dedicated to B2B greatness and that donates 1% of revenue to the Global Penguin Society. Why? Well, it turns out that B2B CMOs and penguins have a lot in common. Both are highly curious and remarkable problem solvers. Both prevail in harsh environments by working together with peers, and both are remarkably mediagenic. And just as a group of penguins is called a huddle, our community of over 300 B2B marketing leaders huddled together to gain confidence, colleagues, and coverage. If you're a B2B CMO, why not dive into CMO Huddles by registering for our free starter program on cmohuddles.com. Hope to see you in a huddle soon. I know you have some other data points that you want to share. Let's get to them.
Well, a few other things. I think, there's really some great news in this survey beyond the things that we've been talking about. So we do have this challenge with the short term. We do have all the things, but the good news is that we asked this question. We don't ask that frequently. So we asked it in 2022, and now we've asked it again in 2026. So how durable are the effects of your company's marketing investments on customers? Durability in this case is an indicator basically of the value of marketing. And so what we see is that number, the median rating, which is because this is an ordinal scale, the median rating has gone up from several months to 6 months. And B2B companies, it's on the high end. So it's more like a year. And so that's suggesting that, again, these effects are marketing is having an impact, and that impact isn't disappearing very easily. That's one thing. When we look across all of the different responsibilities that marketing has been given within organizations, marketing is being given more responsibility in key strategic areas. Things like revenue growth is one of the top areas where marketing gained responsibility. So I think those are very positive things to make sure that we place against some of the challenges that I've described that are important. I do think there is an important issue here in terms of the kind of spending that marketing is engaged in. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, and let's connect the dots because you talk about increased short-termism. And again, some of the CMOs on this call or others were to say, I'm doing that in response to direct orders from my CFO, my CEO, and our investors. We don't care about a year from now. We care about this quarter, and we care about pipeline. And that's what they're being told. So whether or not they have the ability to sell the notion of, hey, I get short term, but also I got to be looking at the market long term too. That's an interesting challenge that I'm afraid a fair number of CMOs are now up for.
Well, and the challenge there is that, I think you're absolutely right. That's what I've seen for a long time, that there are these pressures. We see it in the survey results. And as a result, what we see is that acquisition budgets are about 26% on average greater than retention budgets. Those numbers are larger in B2C companies, where there's an even greater emphasis on acquisition, but they're still high in B2B companies. And I think those pressures are real, and marketing leaders have to deliver against that. On the other hand, what I would say is that when we spend in that way, we bring the attention onto that shorter term effect. As a result, I think we're sending a message about the value of marketing. There's the old quote by Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. If you remember reading that back when you were all at university. And in this case, I think the metrics become the message. They become a message about what is the value of marketing. So that's what leaders, CFOs, CEOs turn to for marketers. That's what they think about. And the challenge here is that when times get tough, that what we see is that then marketing is more likely to be cut, right? It is the first budget that's basically cut from when spending is challenged and when profits suffer. So I think, there's a lot of teaching going on here with the way that the marketers are using these metrics. And of course, they're not doing it in a vacuum. They're doing it within the context of organizational pressures that are very, very real.
Yeah, but it is the focus on short-termism. It's very hard to have a conversation about brand, if you will, or call it reputation, if you're not hitting your pipeline numbers. And even though those are inseparable, and so at least in Huddleland, we tried to talk about, well, let's look at your win rate and let's look at your deal velocity, and let's look at some of those things, which are not, pipeline's always a lagging indicator, but if you look at things like win rate, stronger the brand, most likely, the higher the win rate. And that is an interesting part of this dynamic. But again, they're not getting 2 years or 3 years. They have like a year, but really they're expected to impact pipeline really fast.
Absolutely. So I think it's a yes and, kind of a situation here. Yes, they must do that, but they need to think about proving the value of that, if you want to call it the more intangible aspects of marketing. And there's one very, very nice piece of research that was done by some marketing professors on this. What they did, which was super clever, is they took, your listeners might know about the American Customer Satisfaction Index, ACSI, which comes out of the University of Michigan. And this is collected. And if not, your company may be in there. Certainly your industry is in there. You can see what those scores are if you look up acsi.org. What they did was they took those ratings for companies and they formed a portfolio of companies that performing high on customer satisfaction levels. And then they looked at the performance of those companies over time. And the effects are just simply dramatic. And they've done this now. I can share the paper with you, Drew. It's been done now for 25 years. So it's not a blip.
Right.
It's a real effect. And the effect is just the numbers between even just 2000 and 2014, which is the number I have on the screen in front of me, a 500% return versus the standard S&P, which was 31%. So customer satisfaction does pay. It is a long-term effect. And so, it is something to think about. How is it that we can demonstrate some of that within our companies? Because having this overall sample effect, the one that I described, is only going to be modestly helpful. You need to have something showing up within your own companies that can basically prove that point.
So where do you see marketing's role and maybe spending when it comes to customer satisfaction? And, look, we all know that if your business has a high churn rate, you have a problem. Because no matter what, you're always going to be chasing your tail as you try to grow the business. If you're 20% are falling off the back of the truck every day, it's a problem. But I just want to make sure we're clear from a spending standpoint, from an activity standpoint, in your mind, what should marketers be thinking about when it comes to customer satisfaction? What actions would they take?
So first of all, tracking it regularly and having that broader portfolio of metrics that we were discussing before, because in a lot of companies, customer satisfaction isn't measured at all.
Right. Okay.
And so they, measure it and watch it over time, watch it in response to your spending. There are things that you can watch the effects of what your competitors are doing too. So that would be one thing, but having that broader portfolio is key. I think expanding marketing's cross-functional role, this is having more of what I would call sort of this enterprise role. So it's not just about getting, the flow through or having, the kinds of things that you were describing, that there is this broader effect. Because what we see is that marketers don't have very strong cross-functional, marketing leaders don't have the kinds of cross-functional relationships that we might hope for, especially with CFOs, CHROs, even, the technology folks. Those are not, they're very strong with sales and distribution, which I think would probably be true in your member companies. So having that broader cross-functional impact. But the third is building the capabilities, because the capability is going to be the engine behind those payoffs, however those are achieved. Now, the very specifics I can't probably deliver on, because I think those are going to be, they're going to be differentiated depending on the type of business, but building those capabilities, selling the capability as basically this organizational effect is going to be helpful.
What's interesting is there is almost always high customer satisfaction rate equals high close rate in those two. And low customer satisfaction means fewer testimonials in B2B, which means fewer case histories, which makes it a little bit harder to close the deal and so forth. So, and I think the key point that you're making is, if the company isn't tracking it, marketing can lead that initiative. But more importantly, if CS is low, marketing's not going to work. That's probably the biggest thing. And so, and it's interesting, conversely, if customer satisfaction is good, marketing actually, the halo effect of marketing can be huge. And this is why B2C companies are still using television, because often it's reinforcing how somebody feels, an existing customer feels about it. So there is an impact there. So, all right. Let's see, what else should we be talking about from the study?
Well, one other thing, just to reinforce the point that you were making, and following up on this issue of cross-functional. So when we asked what actions do you take to show the value of marketing to other functions, I mentioned that 86% focus on developing stronger marketing performance tracking, which again reflects the pressures that are being faced. Way down at the bottom of that list is consistent with what we were talking about with customer satisfaction. Collecting customer data, only 54%. Offering novel customer insights, 50%. Running experiments, 58%. So there are opportunities here to collect this kind of data, develop the insights that can really drive growth. More than anything, marketing is the engine for growth within a company. Who else is going to do it? It's not the CFO. In fact, that always irritates me when I hear CFOs talking about growth. I mean, the marketing leader is the one that knows, where the opportunity is. But we have to make sure that we really enact that role within the organization.
And I'm going to just throw out a point which is, I do think that in particular, B2B CMOs have leaned into MarTech to try to track every little thing, to show every little thing is actually paying off. And some have gotten really, really good at it so that they can do. But if you're spending 23% of your budget on MarTech, in order to be able to make the case that marketing is working, that's a lot of money that isn't going into marketing. And so there's an irony there. You're spending more to justify marketing and you're taking a decent chunk of change out of there. So, but I haven't seen anybody say, all right, I'm going to have a smaller stack. I'm just going to get rid of a lot of the tools that I have, because the pressure to show that the dollars that you're spending are working is just so great on marketing. And it doesn't seem to go away. I do want to remind those folks here, if you have any questions. I did see a comment that I wanted to just sort of throw out there, because this is from a CMO who's actually done an amazing job linking marketing and to pipeline. Says that justifying a marketing ROI and customer retention is tough. We tend to link it to expansion, which is still a debate with the CFO when they made heavy investments in sales coverage. So interesting that's hard to sort of make that business case.
Is it because the systems aren't designed to reveal the retention or the growth of customers? I would think that in B2B companies, in some ways, have the upper hand here in terms of tracking the system. So where is the challenge?
we'll have to say, Peter, if you want to come on and ask that, you're more than welcome to. If you don't, we'll just keep going.
I'm happy to jump in if you're all
Oh,
right with that,
good. Yes,
Drew.
please, Peter. Go ahead and
Thank you.
explain yourself, please.
I will. I would love to. I was just starting to type it out, but it's going to be quicker to say it. So, Christine, thank you first of all for coming and joining us. It's been fantastic to hear so much resonating from my own experience. So the specifics of this, I think, is because the perception is that customer retention is primarily a factor of sales working with customer success, usually under the auspices of the CRO. So there's a perception that says, well, we've already got coverage on this account. We've got heavy investments associated with sales. Therefore, marketing's role is not to focus on that. We don't want you to focus on that. We want you to focus on the things that we don't yet have as customers, where we don't have customer success people working on them, meaning acquisition. And so marketers tend to bridge back and say, well, where's the revenue coming from? We need to focus on expanding existing accounts. We need white space opportunities in there. So they tend to sort of justify their investment levels around expansion rather than retention in its own right. And we all know that a percentage point of churn is game changing for any enterprise. So it is a focus at the executive level. Without a doubt, the board's going to be very focused on it. It's part of enterprise value creation. It's going to be crucial. But the perception is that marketing's role there is potentially secondary or tertiary because other investments have been made. And that's what lies behind the comment that I was making there. Now, I'd love to hear from other CMOs on the call as to whether they think that's similar in their environments. But I think that was the background to my comment.
I think it's a really good comment. And with the way that the funnel often looks within organizations, marketing is, at the top and sales is controlling the rest of it. But I think that's a mistake. That would be my argument to say that marketing does have a role at even those later stages of the funnel in terms of growing the business. Sales is only, perhaps, my argument would be that it's only going to take us so far. So I think advocating for a role in the funnel at those deeper stages. There's a case study that I do with my class, and this is one of the things that we see this company doing. They actually divide the funnel in a way that we're marketing, and they describe the role that marketing might play in those later stages. At the same time, it's interesting that I'm thinking about Drew's earlier comment that brand is not important. So if brand is not important, then what's driving, people into the top of the funnel? And how do we?
And just to defend, it's not that, brand is a word that is so misunderstood. It's the word brand that's problematic. Again, if you talk in terms of reputation, you may be able to get, because CEOs, executives know it on an individualized basis. So I think marketers have to, we got to remarket the word brand and either get rid of it and talk about reputation, because it's become too closely linked with and you'll get it. And this happened on a call recently. The CFO said, well, my last two companies tried to justify they spent a lot of money on brand and it didn't work, so stop.
Okay, if I may jump back in again, two comments I wanted to make. I'll come to the brand second. The first point was the way that I've tried to counter this issue around retention and marketing doesn't play a role is to talk about coverage. Because the reality is that salespeople and customer success people have a limited amount of engagement that they can do with one account. The reality is they're probably servicing multiple accounts. They've probably got 15 to 20 accounts that they're trying to take care of in a B2B context. By definition, they are scratching the surface when it comes to engagement with those accounts to influence their thinking and their future purchasing decisions. If you actually, given what Drew pointed out quite rightly, we're investing heavily in MarTech, not just because we want the metrics to prove that what we do is worth doing, but because we need access to many touch points within a typical enterprise. And so we're trying to drive engagement across large communities. And so we do capture a lot of data actually about how many touches we actually have with a given account. How much engagement is there? And when you look at the sales engagement versus marketing engagement, you see a difference. Marketing tends to be up to 10 times more widely engaged than sales within a specific account. Salespeople will sell to people they know in an existing account. They'll go back to the same trough over and over and over. What they won't be able to do is get to a new buying center or get to a different level within the account. And that's where marketing plays its role. And that's where we can justify an investment in an existing account. But the measure of success invariably is, well, did they buy more from us? Have they come back? And did you succeed in getting to a new buying center? That's why expansion becomes a thing. So I think coverage is maybe one way to think about it, but I'd love your thoughts on that, Christine.
I love that. And I think if people aren't doing that yet, I think it's a worthy experiment, meaning, and this systematically manipulate this. So, increase marketing's role in some, randomly select accounts, increase
Good old
marketing.
AB. Good old AB.
I mean, look at the effect, because I think this is what your CFO wants. They want the proof. And you just need to suffer with a control group, meaning a group that's not getting a good idea that you think you might have.
And good luck selling that to the CRO. No, these customers, we're not going to touch that for a while. See how that goes. The other thing I was going to say is the brand issue for us in general is creating a linkage between improvement in brand attributes of some kind or other and business outcomes that are measurable and meaningful. Because when we aggregate it, we can see trending and we can stand behind that. But what our bosses want to see is specifics. Okay.
Causation, right.
We spent $300,000 launching X. So where is that? Show me where that hit. Where did that happen? Okay, you spent 40 grand on a drone show to launch our new brand, and what happened? Nothing. Oh, we threw that money away then, did we? That's how it feels to them. So we've got to be better at linking investment in brand to outcomes that are discernible and valued within the business. And that's why CFOs and CEOs get fed up with it. You just spent more money, but we didn't actually see any build growth in pipeline. We didn't see more revenue. So you just wasted that money then, didn't you? Not doing that again. Go figure it out. So anyway, enough from me.
Peter, thank you for that. Here's where we're headed, I think, Christine, which is right now, LLMs are a small percentage of site traffic that is going to B2B sites, but they're converting at a 4 to 6 times higher rate. But it is quite likely that whatever site traffic companies have in 2027 is going to come from LLMs. And so what I wonder, if all of this conversation is academic, because if it used to be in B2B, they talk about 70% of the journey was done before you even talk to a salesperson. I'm going to argue that LLMs are going to increase that number substantially. And so if you don't show up, like the whole ball game is going to come down to what people are calling either AEO or GEO, which is your answer engine optimization. And I wonder if looking ahead, are we going to radically have to change this? And thank you for the comment, Bill Schroederman, about yes, brand will have a big impact on LLMs and in performance there. So in some ways, we may be going back to things like PR and exposure and wide reputation building things. But on the other hand, little companies are doing amazing things just with AEO optimization and showing up and beating the big companies because they're more nimble, because they can get more things, because they're not afraid of Reddit. So I'm just curious, would you think of it, are we perhaps, at least with B2B and maybe even with a lot of B2C larger purchases, at an inflection point where the buying process is going to completely change?
That's very possible. We asked for the first time in this survey, in that list of all of the different ways in which AI is being used, we asked about what we call GEO
right.
in the survey. So that number is 41%. So I think I mentioned content was in the 70s. This was in the middle, but it's the first time we've asked it. So I was very surprised to see it was so high, to say that companies are using AI in this way. So companies are using it. I think you're right, though. This is another reason, perhaps, to expand the way that we think about marketing's role, because this is going to play such an important role. This is how customers will find us. Now, if you look online and talk to experts, people have their ideas about how you might be able to make sure that your company does appear in that list. But nevertheless, I think all of the different ways that marketing can contribute, building reputation, brand, building positive word of mouth, all of the ways in which, we know marketing can pay off in that, I think these will matter more in the future. And so we may be reversing course, as you said.
Very cool. All right. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I want to just, if you could step back from all the data in the survey, sort of 2 key takeaways you want every CMO listening today to remember and perhaps to act upon.
Yeah, we've covered so much.
But it's okay to be repetitive.
Okay. So one is that I think what we see in the survey is that marketing spending and strategy decisions remain probably more reactive than strategic. Marketing is fundamentally strategic role, function. It has a powerful strategic role, especially around growth. What we see though is that it's being shaped more by financial pressure and executive reflex rather than by marketing priorities. So we need to make sure that that gets resolved and that we think about marketing strategically, we manage it strategically. The second is to really put a premium on getting this talent piece right. So we asked maybe one other finding that dovetails with this recommendation is when we asked marketers to rank order a set of factors important to their future organic growth within the company, having right talent, having all your stakeholders aligned, having the right operating model, having the right data, or having the right technology. The number one factor, the highest rated factor was having the right talent. The lowest rated factor was having the right technology. So marketers do seem to understand the importance of having the right talent, but actions aren't really consistent with that. And so I would say that instinct is right because machines are, at least for now, not going to run themselves. And so, having the right talent is going to be most important to getting the most out of these technologies within organizations.
Well, and even if the machines are going to run themselves, you need to have people that can build the machines and check to make sure that they're running themselves correctly. So, Professor Christine Moorman from Fuqua, or Duke's Business School, thank you so much for joining us today. Fascinating conversation, fascinating results at a really important time in the marketing world. Where can people find you or the survey? And if they want to subscribe, is there a way to do that?
Please. Yes, I would really appreciate that. You can find everything that I've discussed today up at cmosurvey.org. We basically give away the results for free because this is a service for the field. And so you can find all of the results there. Everything is broken out by different kinds of sectors, both B2B and B2C, but also product service. And then within that, different kinds of products and services, also different size companies. So you can kind of find your company benchmark there. So please feel free to look at those results. You can see them over time too. So we've listed or provided everything there free over time if you want to download a couple of the last reports. We do tend to repeat some of the questions, but we also try to be kind of opportunistic, if you will, about capitalizing on new trends. So feel free to download all of that. And then also you'll see a place there where you can sign up to participate. I think a lot of your participants in this webinar maybe did participate. So let me stop and say thank you if you did. There were 308 of you that participated in this last survey. And we would love to have any of you who have not signed up to go ahead and do that at cmosurvey.org. Everything that you share is confidential. We only report statistics like this in the aggregate. So thanks for having me, Drew. Really appreciate it. And great questions. I learn a lot in these sessions, which is one of the reasons I like doing them. So thank you.
If you're a B2B CMO and you want to hear more conversations like this one, find out if you qualify to join our community of sharing, caring, and daring CMOs at cmohuddles.com. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. This show is produced by Melissa Caffrey, Laura Parkin, and Ishar Cuevas. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, and learn more about CMO Huddles or my CMO coaching service, please visit renegademarketing.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. Until next time, keep those renegade marketing caps on and strong.